Welcome to the BudsnReality show. I'm Sean Collins, the guy with a lot to say, and I'm here with a very cool guest, Mr. Lars for President, Lars Mapstead. How you doing today, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, this is I've been wanting to do this for a minute, and the stars never really aligned, and now I've had quite a lot of time off of work, and I've been able to like talk to people and get some people on the show and whatnot. So it kind of worked out. I'm happy to have you on. I was listening to Larry Sharp's show probably a week and a half ago now. He had on Michael White, which was
Yep.
a great show. And they actually,
He's
your name
awesome, by the
came
way.
up. Yeah, your name came up when they were talking about who's running for president in 24 or, who should run. And your name was one of the names they both dropped. So, it's cool to have you on. And, but before you were Lars for president, you know, you were Lars Mapstead. And, that being said, who is Lars before we get into your whole president thing? What are you about? What do you like? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a pretty interesting story, background, history, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
I grew up in Big Sur, California, basically the product of hippie parents, and they drove me around in a Volkswagen bus for the first couple of years of my life. And we were pretty poor. We had goats and an outhouse, and I had no electricity for a number of years, probably till I was around 8 years old. I didn't have electricity. We had kerosene lamps, and part of the time growing up, they were building. My stepdad liked to build houses, and so he would always build the house that we were going to be living in. And so for a while, we lived in this little shack, basically, that was two things of plywood, on each side all the way around. And literally we lived in that for like almost, I think almost a year. And that later became the goat barn. So I always say I grew up in a goat barn. And so, the style of living that I had was, we got clothes from the Goodwill, or my mom made clothes for me. And if you got a rip in your jeans, the patches were coming out, and they were going to be either sewn on or iron on to fix the rip. You weren't getting new jeans. That was out of the question, right? And so even and even I was on food stamps for a while. Like, my family had to get help from the government because we didn't have enough money. My parents worked all the time. They were gardeners pretty much, and they worked hard, but it just not enough money to cover all the stuff that you need to have covered, and kind of a thing. So they relied for a little bit on assistance. It's interesting. I'm pretty sure, I have to go back and ask my mom, but I think if you're on welfare and then you start doing good, they ask you to repay the money that you were, some of the money that you were given, kind of a thing. So I believe my mom repaid a lot of the money that she, borrowed from the
Oh
government in that
wow.
way, which is it's kind of interesting. I didn't know that really existed until she kind of told me about it. So that was an interesting twist on things. But even going into, like, when I was 20 years old or so, I was still pretty broke. I was having little jobs. I started working when I was 15, and just little jobs here and there. But I had some ambitions. I wanted to be a stockbroker. I thought if I was a stockbroker, I would like make lots of money and become a millionaire. And I remember telling my mom when I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, when I grow up, I'm gonna be a millionaire. I'm gonna take care of you, mom. I'm gonna buy you a fancy house, and everything's gonna be good, right? And so, but even like in my 20s, it was paycheck to paycheck living. And at the end of the month, before your paycheck comes and you've already burned through all your money from rent and all that kind of stuff, it's top ramen for the last week of the month, right?
Oh yeah, I remember those
And
days.
so, yeah, you know how that goes. So later on in life, when I did become successful, I measured everything and how much top ramen it would buy. So I would be like, well, those jeans are $40, and that could buy you like 80 packets of top ramen. That's a good enough for an entire month of living. Those jeans seem kind of expensive to me. So everything money wise, came from this viewpoint of being pretty poor and like really valuing money and things, because I didn't have a lot of things growing up.
Right.
So in 1993, I met my wife. We ended up getting married a couple of years later. So I've been together with my wife for 30 years. We have
Wow,
two daughters.
congrats.
And when I was 13, I got my first computer. My grandparents bought me an Atari computer, and I fell in love instantly. I was like tech nerd to the max, right? Like
Okay.
I was learning to program computers when I was like 13 years old, because it was just like, it was so amazing to me to have this tool that seemed so advanced and technological coming from the, the woods that I grew up in. It was like, wow, this is like, I've reached Space Odyssey 2000 or Battlestar Galactica. I'm going to be somebody now,
That's awesome.
And so I started screwing around with that. And then in 1994, right after I met my wife, I was introduced to the internet. And the internet had just first come out. Like the World Wide Web had like literally like was like 3 months old. Mark
Oh,
Andreessen had built the
I remember
Mosaic
that.
browser, and there was no Yahoo, there was no Google, there was none of that stuff
Oh,
existed, right? And it was like this, the early internet was very libertarian, because it was like the information superhighway. It was supposed to be all free. There was no commercial anything. Like people on the internet in those days, they were like, "Oh, you want to do commerce with the internet? No, that's horrible. We're not doing that. This is just sharing information, and a very kind of libertarian idea anyway." So I started companies. I started up companies in my early 20s based around the internet, and I lived in Silicon Valley at the time, so I was right in the thick of it. And each of those companies just kind of were pretty successful, and I just kept selling them, and then I would start up the next one and the next one and that sort of thing. And I ended up having a company that was involved in the cam business, the webcam business. And we merged that company in 2005 with a company called Friend Finder Networks, which a lot of people we had 35 million members. So a lot of people know what Friend Finder Networks is. Dating sites, right? Basically, right? Dating, social community before Facebook or anything like that. That was some of the biggest social communities on the internet. And so my partner and I ended up building that company to 600 employees and doing $350 million a year in revenue.
wow.
So you can see, like, coming from where I came from, the outhouse and the goat barn and the kerosene lamps, to running a company that's doing $350 million a year in revenue. It was like, what is going on? Kind of a crazy thing. And so the money was flowing crazy. It got nuts in there. And so, yeah, so I had that business. We sold it. And then I thought I was going to retire at 40 years old. I was like, I'm done. I got enough money. I'm done. I'm going to go surfing. I'm going to play with my cars. I'm going to hang out with my kids. Life's going to be good. Right.
That's awesome.
But my brain goes 100 miles a minute. And I only lasted about 4 months of playing video games and surfing. And then I was like, oh, I got to go do something with my life again, because this is not cutting it for me. I like success. I like creating things, and so it just fits. So I love cars, like I said, and I collect cars and I race cars. And so I thought, what I'm going to do, I have a lot of cars, mostly pre-war cars, like pre-World War II cars. I like early hot rod Fords. I have a 53 Chevy that's like all chopped and customed, and Mercuries, and lots of Fords and that sort of thing. And then I also race a modern day Porsche, a 1951 Jaguar convertible, and a 57 Alfa Romeo. So I'm kind of all over the map.
Damn.
So yeah, I love cars. It's a lot of fun. They're just a visceral experience of it all, And one of the other interesting things about racing is that when I was 15 years old, my grandfather was driving me to visit my mom on the day before Thanksgiving, and a drunk driver hit us and killed my grandfather next to me. And that caused me to go spiral down a really bad path, right? But I had this fear of automobiles, right? Like when they picked me up from the hospital, I was like, I'm not getting in the car. They're like, how are you going to get home? I'm like, I'll walk. I'm never getting in the car again, Right. And so one of the things to overcome my fears is I always wanted to be Speed Racer. Remember the cartoon Speed Racer?
Oh yeah.
And I always wanted to be that guy. I want to be like, I'm going to be this winning these races and stuff, And so I had to overcome my fears and just push through it and do racing anyway, even though I had all these fears in my head about this, this car crash that I was in. So I took that, and then Facebook kind of was just coming out in around 2007. It was, it's still pretty early on in the days of Facebook. And so I started some Facebook pages around cars, and the company was called Legendary Speed. and I posted pictures of my cars. I posted blog posts, whatever. I just went at it, just having fun. And that turned into a huge successful business. And I amassed over 25 million fans on my Facebook pages. And this was supposed to be my hobby. And it turned into this huge successful business on top of what I had already done. Right. And so I did that for almost 10 years. And then Facebook kind of like pulled the plug on the monetization of that. So they're still there, but I don't really, play with them too much because they don't make any money on it. I like to make money. It's money is kind of interesting. What's that?
I said money is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to me, it's kind of like just a score in a video game to a certain degree. That's just your points that you're getting, right? I'm here to win. I don't really, that's just like on the way of getting there kind of a thing.
Right.
So, I've had just to kind of sum it up, my life started out with quite a bit of hardships and, poorness. And then I moved into this spot where I, accumulated a lot of wealth and I, ran a lot of successful businesses, but I never like forgot the top ramen days, right? It's like even still today, I don't live a lifestyle of like a rich jet setter guy. I mean, I live comfortably, but it's that never gets out of your head, right? It's like you don't want to get too full of yourself, right? You don't want to think, well, I'm so special that I'm above other people. And it doesn't work like that. I'm just a regular guy among regular people, right? Like I don't want to be above or below anybody. I would just want to like relate to people,
Yeah, I dig that 100. And actually, I grew up pretty poor myself. We had electricity, but I mean, like food stamps and help and stuff. It was a single mom and I, growing up, so we needed assistance, back in the day. Now, come back to recent. You're a regular dude. You've had some businesses, you've had some success. What on earth made you decide, hey, I want to run for president?
Yeah, well, all my friends question my sanity for sure. The thing is I kind of have this whole political origin also that goes along with my regular story, which is that I started out with the first election I could vote in was the election that Ronald Reagan was running in. Right. And I've always been interested in, I can't remember. It was 1980. Was it 80? Maybe 1990, probably, whatever that election was, I would say.
I'm trying to think. Well, 92 was Clinton.
Yeah. So before that one, 98. Because I was 97 was when I was like 18, I think. So 98. So
okay.
So I had gotten, after the car wreck, I had gotten a little bit of money from the car wreck, and so I wanted to do the right thing with it. But growing up the way that I did, I had no knowledge of anything to do with how you handle money or what you should do with money, right? And so I basically like took a crash course for the next 30 years in financial markets. And that's why I wanted to be a stockbroker. I just love the economics and the way that the financial markets work and the way the economy works and how intricate it is. And like you push and you pull on this thing and it causes all this ripple effects, for everybody, and how like literally just changing the interest rate can affect everybody's life across the country. Right. Like it's crazy to me that like these little changes that seem like they shouldn't do anything have massive consequences to everybody. Right. And so I voted for Reagan mostly because he was talking about money and he was talking about too much taxes. And I was like, yeah, why is the government taking all this money? I don't get any benefit from it. So even at age 18, I was already like figuring out that I didn't really like the government, but I didn't realize that he was the same as everything else. Right. Okay. And so what ended up happening was I didn't really vote for him because he was a Republican. I don't even know that I really knew Republican or Democrat. I just looked at the people that were running and was like, well, out of the guys that I'm offered, this is the best thing. But I quickly realized that the choices that I was being passed off were not the best thing. They were like like this is a sack of crap and this is also a sack of crap, but slightly less a sack of crap. So I guess I'm going to vote for this guy. Right. And
We've all been there.
so the next guy that came around that sort of caught my attention was Ross Perot. And Ross Perot, he did these infomercials where he's holding up these signs and he was talking about the debt and how we were like suffocating the future generations of America under this massive pile of debt, and that it was unsustainable. And he had all these, charts and graphics and stuff. And it made a lot of sense to me. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want. I want somebody that's going to go in and is going to like crush the system and like stop spending money we don't have. It makes total sense to me that like you don't want to spend more money than you got. I mean, okay, in an emergency, yes, you kind of just have to bite the bullet. But unfortunately, every day seems to be an emergency in Washington, and they never stop spending the damn money, right? So it's always more debt, right? That's the solution, right? It's always an emergency. Everything's an emergency. They never let a good emergency go to waste. They don't. They create emergencies so they can keep spending, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then after that, I looked at Ron Paul. I was like, oh, this guy, he's different than these other guys too. He's like not really towing the line of and he's also talking about economics. See, there's a pattern for me. It's always about the economy, right? It's like always about like, how do you make more money? How do you keep more of the money that you have? I love the idea of the American dream and everybody coming up and getting successful. Like, I applaud that. Like, I want everybody in America to have so much wealth that nobody has to think about, eating top ramen ever again. Like, that would be my dream, right? That'd be my ideal, is that everybody is like flush with cash and no one has to like be pissed off at another guy because they have more or less than each other or whatever. It's just like everybody is satisfied. That's where I want to get America, right? And so I just kept going with that. So I think I voted for Clinton the second time, and the reason I voted for him the second time was because the Republicans were going after him so hard over getting the BJ in the Oval Office, and I just thought, why are they spending so much time going after this? Who cares what he gets, what he's doing in his private time? I don't care, exactly. Right? And so Newt Gingrich and Ken Starr, they were just such kooks, and I was just like, I'm voting for this guy just to say F you to those guys, right? Because it was just like, it pissed me off, right? But really, that was the last time I voted for any Republican or Democrat. After that, it was just always been an independent thing. And I went for Gary Johnson 2 times, and then we had Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen. So, and I didn't really ever identify as a libertarian until I took the world's smallest political quiz. It was going around on Facebook, right? It was going around on Facebook, and all my friends were like, oh, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and I was like, well, I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I wonder what this stupid quiz thinks I am, right? So I took it, and it says, you're a libertarian. And I was like, what, libertarian? I'm like, oh yeah, Ron Paul guy was a libertarian. Maybe I am. Maybe I'll look into that a little bit. So I did a deep dive into libertarian, and I was like, oh, yeah, like 90% of what these guys are saying is what I believe in and have believed all my life. And that the duopoly is like I hate getting foisted these 2 choices, which aren't really choices at all. It's just like, here's the two piles of crap that we've picked for you, pick one of them, right? And it's like, that irritates me on the inside like nobody's business. And so that's why I'm running, is basically to give choice to people, right? And to end government coercion in people's lives, right? To let people have freedom in their life, and basically just spread the message of liberty, because no one else is doing it. The duopoly is very happy with the status quo. They'll march out whatever thing that they want to pitch, but make no mistake, they're happy with leaving it exactly the way that it is, because it's working fine for them.
Yep. I mean, it's crazy. Like, for instance, right now, the GOP is really harping on the Biden administration spending. And I'm like, yeah, wait a minute, you guys, like, do you not remember how much money Trump spent in 2020 alone? Not to mention the other 3 years before that. I mean, This is at this point, I think it's just like, okay, we're going to outspend the other guy, and then we'll just keep out spending the other guy. But now we're in a situation where, and by the time the show comes out, it'll already happen, but they have a decision to make on the cap, right? Because we don't have any money. We have printed all the money we're going to print.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things on that. One is on the cap. the Republicans already played this game the last time, and it cost them the entire election because they basically stalled the economy, and they like people were not getting their checks. And if you want to piss the people off, don't give them their money, right? Like that. Like I don't know what game they're playing or what hill why they want to die on this hill, but that's a horrible place to die on the hill. I mean, I'm not in favor of increasing the debt, but that money's already been spent. And so we basically just need to fulfill our obligations because you don't want to put the whole credit risk of America at risk. And so, I mean, we want to reduce the deficit and we want to balance the budget, but by like holding all of America hostage is, I don't think, the way to do it. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that the Democrats and the Republicans both, they will say that they want a certain thing passed, like they want less taxes or more taxes or Medicare for Medicaid for all, whatever it is that they're championing that time, right? And they'll get into office and they'll have full control of the Congress and the presidency, and then they won't pass any of that stuff at all. They won't even bring it up. They pass some stupid thing that no one cares about, and then or whatever the problem du jour at the moment is. And then what they do is they wait for the midterms, just happened. And as soon as they lose power, they start trying to pass all this stuff that they should have been passing in the 2 years that they owned the Congress, right? Yep. And then what they do is they use the other party as cover for their failure to pass the stuff that their people actually want. So they're like, oh, the Republicans blocked us. Oh, the evil Democrats blocked us, right?
Which is like, what we're going to see now.
It's total. Well, we have 2 years of basically pandering and virtue signaling that's going to come out of both parties, finger pointing. You guys are bad. You're blocking us. You're not allowing. But it's because they're dysfunctional and they're not going to pass anything for 2 years.
And in the meantime, nothing gets done. Not a damn.
That's
thing
right. Nothing except for a lot of finger pointing and posturing basically for the next. All we're doing is posturing for 2024 right now. That's all everybody's doing. They're like, well, look at what we tried to do and the evil bastards stopped us. And then as soon as one of them gets in power, they will stop that all. I mean, look, Obama, he had full control of Congress. Did he do medical health for everybody? No, he didn't. He didn't even attempt it, right? And then he waited until the Republicans got in before he tried to pass Obamacare. And then he was like, oh, the Republicans are stopping us. And it's like, well, why didn't you pass? If you really, that's what you believe in, why didn't you pass it when you had full control?
Yes.
Right. And then you get to Trump and it's like, oh, the evil Republicans stopped us from building our wall that we promised everybody. It's like, well, you had control of the Congress for 2 years. Why didn't you just do it? Right. And it's like, because they don't actually want to do it. What I realized is that these things that they have, they're great money makers. They're great for fundraising, right? The evil Republicans are going to steal blah. The evil Democrats are going to do blah. And you need to give us money so that we can stop them from doing it. If they solve the problem, they solve their fundraising ability. They make it so they can't take in as much money. So they have an incentive to not fix stuff, right? And like I said before, they're both very happy with the way the system is working. And they have no incentive to change it.
Because at the end of the day, it's a uniparty. It's all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Really I call them the duopoly is the party of the corporations.
That's exactly.
And that makes so much sense to me,
It is. And so, it's funny because right now the Republicans are like, oh, we're going to abolish the IRS and get rid of income tax. And and we're going to defund the 87,000 IRS agents. Well, check this out, y'all. The Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the presidency for 2 years during Trump. That never even came up, not one time. So we know this is bullshit, what is happening right now. We know the Senate's going to stop it. I mean, it's
people who are paying attention and start watching the cycle, you can see it. It's plain. It's very plain that this is going on. But what's interesting is I would say the vast majority of Americans don't see that. And they just see that like the evil Democrats are now stopping the Republicans from abolishing the IRS. We had a chance to abolish the IRS and the evil Democrats are stopping it. I mean, that's literally what people think. And then the Republicans are like, well, we tried to abolish the IRS and we couldn't do it. What we just need is a little more money so that we can defeat them in 2024 and we can finally push through this agenda. Won't you help us by sending us some money right now? And then like that's
and people just
it's all about the Skrilla. It's all that's right. It's all about the Skrilla.
That's right, man.
Yep.
Now you're coming through, you're going to run in 2024 and you're running as a libertarian.
That's right. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that so much.
Yep.
Now, when it comes to policy, I'm going to ask you a series of things on what you would, what's your take on these certain policies. Now, one of the big ones right now is the border, and it is a disaster down there. We all know it. Nobody seems to have a plan to how to fix it. Or they might say they do, but they're not trying. Nobody's trying to do anything down there. They'll keep everybody in cages.
Well, of course, it's the same thing. It's exactly that same thing. Is no one wants to fix the border issue because it's a great fundraising tool, right? Oh, we got to stop the flow of illegal immigrants. They're all coming in and they're ruining America. Send us money so we can stop the Democrats from, opening the borders and letting everybody in. And then it's on the other side. It's like, oh, the evil Republicans don't care about people and there's people suffering at the border and they're putting kids in cages. Send us money so that we can stop the Republicans from harming poor, innocent people. That's the narrative, right? It's like they both have their narrative and they're both like, send us money so we can stop the other guy from doing our thing, right? But I don't think there's anybody in America that wants people to suffer. Right. I don't think that's the case. I don't think the Republicans are sitting around going, I wish, more people were suffering at the border. I don't think that's the case. Right. And I don't think that the Democrats really want to just like have everybody come in with no rules at all. Right. So the thing is that what I've kind of come to understand about politics after running for a year now is that when we talk politics, we talk about our ideal, right? Our ideal, like a libertarian ideal, is to end the Fed or to abolish the IRS, right? Those are ideals. That's what we'd like to get to. If in our perfect world, if we could wave a wand, all ABC alphabet agencies would be out of business. The government budget would be balanced, and the world would be a beautiful place, right? That would be like our ideal. And the Democrats have their ideal, and the Republicans have their ideal. Everybody wants some form of it's they truly believe in this stuff, right? That's what they want and champion, and they think it's the right thing. We all think that we're doing the right thing, right? But the ideal is never going to happen for anybody, right? It's like it's a fantasy world, right? So we have to live in reality. I call myself a practical centrist libertarian. Okay. I have my ideals, but if I'm president and the Congress comes to me and says, hey, we want you to pass this law, and this law reduces income tax by 20%, am I going to veto it and say it's not enough? I'm not going to do that until the IRS is abolished. No, I'm going to go in the direction of as least amount of taxes as possible, right? Whatever incremental change I can get toward my ideal, that's the direction I'm going. Right. So I call it first things first, right? First things first is we just got to take the next right indicated action toward our ideal. Right. And so with the border, obviously it's not working for anybody. Nobody's happy. Right. Nobody's happy. And so, and I would say that this was one of those things that I didn't back on the libertarian idea until I really delved into it. Like my first take on it was we should have secure borders and we should not let people in rampantly, and we should vet people and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I live in Santa Cruz, California, which is next to a huge farming community, like one of the biggest farming communities, in the country. And I have a lot of farmer friends, and they're like, hey, I can't get any workers. No one wants to pick in the fields to pick the food, right? And so I need more workers. And I also live next to Silicon Valley. And in Silicon Valley, they're like, hey, I need more tech people that know how to do what I need to do. And the only people that know how to do that are available right now are in India and in in Czech Republic and in, Ukraine before all the Ukraine stuff blew up. So they're like, we need more work visas. We need more people coming in to take care of these areas that there's not enough workers on, right? So the immigration situation is complex. I think a lot of people, the main complaint that I hear on the Republican side of immigration is that they don't want people coming in and getting free services. They basically don't want people coming in and taking money out of the system and going to new people that are coming in. They don't feel like that's fair or whatever it is, right? That's going on. And so that was kind of my original take on it. But after really delving into it, I was like, well, if we get rid of the welfare state, right, then that fear kind of goes away, right? And like if we like tone down the welfare state a lot, so it's like in the libertarian ideal, you need multiple things to go into effect for it to make sense, right? So I'm basically for a lot more free flow of people. I still think we need to check for people to make sure they're not bringing in nuclear weapons and are going to, blow stuff up, or that bad people are coming in. I think you do need some regulation. But I think these people are going to come no matter what, whether we want them to or not. You're not going to stop them. You're not going to build a giant wall and stop them. It's not even realistic, right? So what can we do? Well, we can come to a good understanding between all parties, all stakeholders on immigration of what we actually want to accomplish, and stop basically making people miserable, and be more humanitarian toward people at the same time, right? So it's like, I don't want to sell out America, but I also don't want to be harming people, and I want people to be able to come and get the escape oppression. If they're fleeing from some country that's like really oppressive and is going to kill them, then I think we should take people in, right? And almost everybody that's here, their family came here from somewhere else. I do have a little bit of Native American in me, so I can say some of my family came from here, but for the most part, my generations came from other places. And so how can I sit around and say, well, it was fine for me to come here, but now that I'm here, you're not allowed, right? It's like, and every time go ahead.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you're Caucasian American, if you're a white American, your family is a bunch of border jumpers. You're not from here. I mean, it's just what it is. So how are you going to be mad about people trying to come here when your family came and did it? But a lot of people will be like, well, my family did it the right way and blah, blah, blah. What was the right way back then?
The thing is, if you look at like the immigration kind of over time, and you still really kind of like dive into it, right? Every group of people that came were looked on as inferior, as bad people, as criminals, right? Like whatever you want to call it, whether it was the Irish people, the Italian people, every kind of group of people that came over, the Swedish people, whatever it was, where they came from, they were looked down on. The Chinese immigrants into California when the California gold rush was coming, right? They were treated atrociously, right? But they were brought in as labor, essentially, right? And so it's just about treating people with respect and at the same time not abusing other people by bringing those people in. If that makes any sense to you.
That makes sense to me. It probably makes sense to a lot of people. Some people that don't want to hear stuff like that aren't just, they're not going to want to hear it. And that's just what it is. I found that, through doing this show and doing the whole Twitter thing and blah, blah, blah. Like, you're just not going to reach some people, and that's what it is. And that's fine. Then it's
I think for me, it's that I think I am a centrist on this position, that I'm not like full open, like do whatever you want to do, and I'm also not for shutting everything down and keeping everybody out. I think I'm for more a better path to citizenship for people. And there's a lot of people like that have families that they like a spouse or something that they get from Canada or from another country, not necessarily Mexico, but like they're coming from wherever they're coming from. And the process to become a US citizen for these people is insane. It's like, you know, a 5-year, 10-year process to just like get through the system. And it's like when our ancestors came through Ellis Island, it was like, oh, do you have any diseases? No. Do you have, you know, are you a political you know, person that's gonna like be bad for America? No. Well, come on, come on,
Right.
come on in, right? I was like, and so, you know, we need a faster process for getting people legalized and in once you're legalized and you're in the system, then you're going to be contributing to the system. You know what I mean? And so I think it's like with everything, it's kind of like prohibition. You're prohibiting citizens, you're prohibiting people, right? And every time that the government uses prohibition on something, it causes black markets and it causes things to be distorted and bad. And so this is prohibition on people is really what it comes down to, right? And so end prohibition on people. That's, you know, of course we got to keep out the bad actors, but in general, most people coming across the border are just fleeing for a better life, right? And
Absolutely.
they're willing to work. And if you put in that much effort to get here, you're probably really willing to work and make your life better. That's just my take on it.
I worked in the service industry for 20 years.
Yep.
Front of the house guy, waiter, bartender, management, whatever. And
Yep.
being said, a lot of my friends are from Central and South America.
Yep. Yep.
And, they came here to escape oppression. I actually had one buddy who worked for the Guatemalan government, and he needed to get up out of there because it was crazy, and he got his family out, and they're all citizens.
Yeah, I was a waiter and a busboy and a dishwasher for a while, and it just reminded me of the worst job that I ever had to do, and that was clean out the grease trap at a restaurant. I don't know if you've ever. It's nasty.
It is nasty.
Like nasty, dude. And I remember I had they told me to go clean out the grease trap, and I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, there's a pit in the back of the building, and you got to like clean it out. And they gave me some plastic bags, and I went back there and I started filling this thing up with a shovel. You know what I mean? The stuff was so nasty, and then it got really heavy and I was dragging it and the damn bag broke and it like went all over my shoes. It was so gnarly. And I'm just like, oh, I never want to do this job again. It was such a bad job. Oh man.
Were you the new guy that when they made you do that? Were you the new guy?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. The new guy. Oh yeah. No, that job I had when I was like 15 or 16 years old. So they knew they could just tell me to do whatever and I was going to do it. Right.
That's hilarious, man. That's a very restaurant thing to do, is to make the new guy do some nasty shit. Sure. Now, moving on to next policy, which seems to be very important to most all of us Americans, and that is foreign policy. Where are you at on foreign policy and where all of our money goes? A la Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. For Ukraine, $100 billion and counting. Yeah, I think I probably align with most libertarians on foreign policy in that, I believe that America should basically have a military for defense only, that if you want to go to any kind of war, that Congress needs to approve of it, in a congressional act and not just some presidential whim like, oh, we need to, bomb this or do this. I think the president can probably, if there's a serious situation that needs to be acted on immediately, that isn't necessarily a war but is some kind of like minor scrimmage or something like that, then I think that that's probably okay. But with we've been in wars my entire life, your entire life. All we do is war. It seems like as soon as we like end one thing, immediately something somewhere else flares up, or maybe we have 3 or 4 things going on at the same time, and as soon as one sort of ends, the next stuff gets together, and you can see by Congress how they're voting. Like this last omnibus bill that they passed, right? Sure. The military asks for a budget. They say we need $850 billion for this next year of activity, right? And more often than not, Congress gives them more than what they ask for. So you've got the military saying, I need 850 billion, and then the Congress comes and goes, okay, here's 900 billion. And the military is like, yeah, but we already budgeted everything for 850. Why do we need this extra 50 billion? Well, the reason they need that extra 50 billion is to give the defense contractors that the Congress is in the pockets of, right?
Yep.
So that's fairly easy, right? So I feel like Ukraine is, in my opinion, is a lot due to our own making. That's been brewing ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall, right? This is not some new situation that's occurred, right? And we, it's kind of like I look at the situation where the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Russia was putting missiles into Cuba, and we freaked out, and we went in and did the Bay of Pigs and all the stuff that went on during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and basically we freaked out. So why is it that we don't see that Putin is going to freak out when we start putting missiles in their backyard, right? Like it's okay for us to act like that, but as soon as we do it somewhere else, then they're the evildoers. I don't see it that way, and I don't condone at all what's going on in Ukraine. I don't condone the invasion of Ukraine by Putin. I think that's horrible. I deplore the loss of life, right? But I feel like it's interesting. In World War II, we didn't get into the war for a while. Like we were like, oh, we're not, that's your problem over there, Europe. That's your problem, Britain and France. That's your problem, right? But we gave them money while we were not at war with them. But here's the interesting thing. The money was a loan, right? It was a loan. It was not a gift. And that's the difference that's going on right now, right? That right now we gifted Ukraine $100 billion of taxpayer money. And what I want to know is, why didn't we do the same thing that we did in Europe, where we loaned the money to them, and the money was backed up by infrastructure like ports and airports and mines and minerals, whatever it is, so that we as US taxpayers get something for our money? Right? It's not, I don't think it should be a gift. I don't think it should be a gift of I don't mind helping people out if they're, being oppressed, but I don't want to be gifting other countries stuff. And certainly my ideal would be to, end the wars as much as possible, bring troops home from, we don't need to be the police of the world. It's not real. It's not our job. It's not, as a taxpayer, that's not what I want to spend my money on. I think most people, if you ask them if that's what they want to spend their tax dollars on, I think that's the number one thing that people would want to pay less of, right? But with all that being said, I think it gets back to really just, I want Congress to enact war if we're going to go to war. I don't want it to be just presidential blah 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 whim, and I want to have a defensive government, not an attacking government, not a colonialism style government.
Well, I mean, that's what it has been. That's what it has been. Pretty much any war that's post World War II had nothing to do with American liberty or freedom. Nothing at all.
Yeah.
It was modern day colonization stuff.
Yeah. My grandfather. So my grandfather he went off to the Korean War when he was like, I think 17, 18 years old, early on. And in the Korean War, there was a battle called the Chosin Lake, the Battle of Chosin Lake. And I want to say like 2,000 soldiers had pushed the Koreans all the way back up to the Chinese border. And it was like Thanksgiving time. And they were getting ready to go home. And the Chinese came in and surrounded them. And out of that 2,000 people, only 200 men survived. And that was one of those guys was my grandfather.
Wow.
And he had to march out of that area. He had to march out of there, and they had to burn villages along the way to stay warm, because it was the middle of winter and the government hadn't given them proper, clothing and stuff to fight this war, because they didn't think they were going to be there that long. Right. And you'd think, like, after you made it out of that mess, they'd send you home and you'd be done. But no, they put him in a foxhole on the side of a hill for the next 6 months while the Chinese would charge at him playing a bugle, and they would just like come at him, and he'd have to shoot them all. And then they didn't have enough bullets, so they have to go down into the people that they just shot and collect up bullets for the next round of shit that was coming at him. Gnarly, right?
Wow.
And he survived all that, and then he went back for Vietnam. And he did the full Vietnam thing. I'm like, oh, dude, you're legitimate, It's like, and the guy is the nicest kindest, like I never knew any of this stuff till he got quite old and he started talking about it a little bit. He wrote a little book and stuff, and I was like, oh, I didn't know, this is gnarly, because he's like the nicest, kindest person you could ever imagine, and so it was just, yeah, war is just, it's awful. It's hopefully none of us have to go through it. I would be really afraid right now if America had to get into a real war, because if you look at the 20-something-year-old kids right now, and if you think of them having to be in a trench in, what we had to go through, it would be bad for us, I think.
Yeah, they're too soft. Like, so one of my very best friends in the entire world, he's a 20-year Ranger. He retired back in 19, and he said something along those lines to where, like, he was glad he got out when he did, because he knows those young kids that are coming up aren't going to be able to hang,
Yeah.
But he collects his pension, and that's great for him. He deserves it. You know what I mean? He deserves every penny. 20 years dodging bullets and shooting people, shit. He deserves more than what they're giving him, But so the next thing on policy that I think would be important to people is healthcare, man. Where are you at on healthcare? Where do you think we should be on healthcare in America?
Yeah, I think this is probably the toughest situation, because I want people to be happy and healthy, but I what I've kind of come to understand with the whole healthcare situation, and you have the Obamacare and all that kind of stuff. It's all my life, healthcare has been getting more expensive, insurance has been getting more expensive, and the service that you get when you go to the doctor has been getting worse and worse. I don't know if that's been your experience, but it's like, oh, I want to go to the doctor. Oh, okay, that'll be a 6-month waiting list. It used to be you called up and you're like, I want to go to the doctor, and they're like, come in this afternoon, right? It's like, wait, why do we have a 6-month waiting list? And it's like, why am I paying all this money so that I can have a 6-month waiting list? Well, what has been going on all my life from the very beginning? Government has been getting involved in healthcare over and over and more and more and more. And it's like, one thing I've learned is that if you want the price of something to go up and the service level to go down, just get government involved.
Amen.
And you're guaranteed you're guaranteed for that to be the case. So I think that we need to, get government out of this stuff and let the free market work its magic, right? It's like competition is what drives down prices. Competition is what leads to more innovation, right? And so not only do we have this healthcare situation, but also all the medicines, right? And the FDA, and like the meddling of the government in finding new cures for stuff. The cost goes up dramatically, right? And also when you have the government involved in it, it creates monopolies, because there's the hoops to jump through to like create new medicines or to do new stuff are so huge that you have to have such huge backing in order to even start trying any of that kind of stuff, that only the giant corporations can really compete, right? And so in general, I would say that my solution for healthcare is to reduce government wherever possible in the healthcare system and let the free market work itself, right? And I think that there's also an opportunity for kind of a dual system in healthcare, one where, like, if you want government kind of healthcare, then let's say that's regulated, government healthcare that's regulated. You can choose that. But if you want to have a government healthcare that's not regulated, right, you can also choose that. And I don't think, what we have right now is you can only have regulated, right? You have no other options. So if for instance, somebody comes out with a drug that it could cure whatever cancer that I have, but the government has decided that it's not available yet, or that might be too dangerous or whatever, shouldn't that be something that I make the decision about, because it's my life that's on the line, right?
Yes.
Why does the government get to decide whether I can take this medicine or not? And then it's the same thing with drugs, right? It's the same thing with the war on drugs. It's like the government doesn't need to be my nanny. I'm perfectly capable of making an informed decision for myself about the things that I put in my body, what I eat, who I sleep with, whatever it is. I can make those decisions. I don't need nanny government telling me how to do any of that stuff. I'm totally for bodily autonomy, for you choosing the way that you want to live your life, as long as you're not hurting other people. It's very simple. That's the beauty of libertarianism to me, is like, I just want to live my life free to make my own choices without government telling me this is how you have to do it. You have no other choice.
I mean, it's simple. The libertarian ideals, I should say, are very simple. Literally, don't hurt people.
Yeah.
Don't take their stuff. Leave us alone. That's it. And the duopoly refuses to do any of those said things. It's so crazy. And to where, like, most everybody wants to be left alone, and they don't want to hurt people or take their stuff. But here they are.
It's interesting
that puts the rules out there about hurting people and taking their stuff are the ones who are hurting us and taking our stuff.
Yeah. It was recommended to me that somebody said the best libertarian speech that they had ever listened to was Harry Brown's acceptance speech for his presidential election. So I went on, and that's actually online on C-SPAN. Recorded it, right? So I listened to that speech, and then I ended up buying one of the books that he wrote, which was, I think it's called like Why Government Sucks, or Why Government Isn't Working, or something like that. And I've been reading that book, and it's really opened my eyes to a lot of interesting new thoughts about government coercion. So I've kind of come up with this idea that, when you have one group of people that's using the government to force their ideas and their will onto another group of people, that's government coercion, right? And whenever you do that, you're creating division, because you have one group of people saying to another group of people, this is how you must behave, this is how you must act, we know what's best for you, and if you don't like it, we're using this guy with a gun to tell you that that's how you're going to do it, right? And so that's the division. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, because they both do it. They both try to force their ideals and their opinions down upon you and tell you how to live your life, right? And that, I think that's the thing that turns me off the most about the duopoly, is just that they are willing to use the government to force you to live their ideals.
Yes. You're absolutely correct. And I wish more people would wake up to that and stop fighting each other over the people who treat us like this. I mean, literally, I mean, it's like watching people fight over their slave master almost. That might be a little harsh, to say or something like that. But really, in theory, I mean, these people are trying to control every aspect of your life. And you want to fight about it with your family or your friends or whoever it may be, and it gets exhausting, and it's very sad being an outsider, being a libertarian. I'm an anarchist, whatever you want to call me, it's sad to watch my friends and family and even myself, I've lost people close to me, not lost them, but like they don't want to be a part of my life anymore because of how I feel politically. And that's pretty messed up.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. For one thing, I haven't really been pushing that I'm running for president on any of my personal social media pages, because I know that politics are just toxic. And because people, it goes back to that whole thing of the ideal, right? We talk about our ideal, but that's not reality, right? Our ideal is not reality. And so everybody like gets into this position, this boxing position, defending their ideal, when their ideal is never really going to happen. Right. And so, and they get so bent out of shape, and they're like, they can never come to the middle ground, right? Where actually stuff's going to happen. The middle ground is where stuff's going to happen, right? There's going to be little incremental changes from the center. It's not going to be like we're moving straight to, one direction or another. Right. And so I came up with this today. I said, look, everybody's pissed off. Democrats are pissed off. Republicans are pissed off. Libertarians are pissed off. Well, libertarians are always pissed off, but you get the idea. And we need a change, and I'm here to make the change. That's it. That's really that's the bottom line.
That's awesome, man. Now let's talk about taxes, man.
Oh, my favorite.
Yeah, I mean that's important to all of us. Every voter, every American in the world, taxes are a thing, and we keep getting bent over and they don't even spit on it anymore before they fuck us.
No,
My French, but
no,
whatever.
no.
It's, and
Yep,
it's not even like you get to vote on it. They're like, hey, we're taking more of your paycheck, whether you like it or not,
yep,
and so,
yep.
and they don't even do what they're supposed to do with the money. That's, that's the big part of it. So like, obviously libertarians are all taxation theft, taxation's extortion,
Yep.
whatever you want to call it. But like, what would be your remedy or your policy on taxes that could work?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a quick story. After I sold my company, and we obviously got a lot of money for the company, the IRS came knocking.
Oh yeah.
Right. And they audited me straight away. They're like, boom, we got you. And this lady, she came after me. She had a hard on for me. She came after me for 5 years. She was gonna defeat the evil rich guy. I had like assumed this new title somehow, right? And so she came out to me and she said, well, you got all this money and you owe us this much taxes. And I was like, well, the interesting thing is that money that you're talking about right there, I never got. And she didn't listen to me at all, and she kept coming and coming. And so 5 years later, after this inquisition, she's sitting in the office with my accountant and her big boss that she pulled in from the IRS, right? And the big boss, they say, oh, we want to ask you some questions. And I'm like, okay. And the big boss says, so what did you do with this money that you got? And I'm like, I never got any of the money. I've been telling you guys that for 5 years, and nobody seems to want to listen. And he's like, okay, well, let me ask you this. Where did you put the money that you got? And I'm like, dude, I don't know how many times I can tell you people I never got any money from this thing, right? And so finally he says, so let me get this straight. You never got any of the money? And I'm like, yes, that's correct. And he's like, okay. And I could just kind of see steam coming out of his ears, because they had spent 5 years coming at me. And he's like, okay, well, we're done here. And they could hear him like berating the lady, right? And they basically, they never want to like feel like they didn't get something out of you, so they found some wash sale that moved taxes from 1 year to the next, which meant that I didn't pay any more tax, but it made them feel like they really had gotten me, you know what I mean?
Geez.
After this 5 year, and like literally they were breathing down my neck for 5 years. Like every year I had to like suffer under this threat of oppression that they were going to come and take all my money, right? That I worked so hard for, right? And it's like, nobody should have to live like that. And the whole, every year, and as you get more investments and you get more assets, you end up having to file more and more paperwork, right? Like my tax return on some years has been in the hundreds of pages, like literally. And I'm like, who in their right mind would have a system where you have to file hundreds of pages of tax? It's insane. Like, and I think every year I think, wow, I've got to take two weeks out of my life at a minimum to dig up all this paperwork. I'm not sure I got all the paperwork. I'm not sure that I even know all the paperwork that I'm supposed to give them. Get it all together, give it to my accountant. So that's 2 weeks out of my life every year that I'm not working, that I'm not being productive, that I'm basically doing free work for the government so they can take my money from me. Right. Which is ridiculous. I mean, just think if everybody in America had 2 extra weeks out of the year to work, how much, you know what I mean? Like, what would that do to our GDP? What would that do to people's pocketbooks if you didn't have to like spend all this time accounting for this, horrific system, right?
Right.
So it's funny. Gary Johnson pitched the fair tax when he was first running, and that was the first time I ever heard about the fair tax, right? And I looked into it and I was like, oh, this fixes so many of the problems that people, have, because the Democrats basically they feel like, well, it's not even just the Democrats. A lot of people feel that the tax system is unfair, that rich people don't pay their fair share, that they're paying too much, and vice all around, right? And so I was like, this kind of fixes that situation, because the reason people feel like it's not fair is because it's so convoluted, no one can actually understand it, right? And so when they see the headline that so-and-so didn't pay any tax, they're just like, well, the system is broken. They should have had to pay tax, but you don't know all the computations and permutations that had to go through in order to get to that number, right? Everybody, unless you're committing fraud to the government, you're following the tax law, exactly as it was laid out. And if you are paying no tax and you get audited and you are seen to have no tax, then that's the tax code's fault. That's not, that you were, skating the system. And people talk about loopholes, right? Oh, well, they have these loopholes. Well, everybody has the same loopholes. It's not like there's some different tax code for different people, right? It's just that when you have assets and stuff, you get to utilize the tax code in a different way than you do if you don't have anything, right? So that's the thing. But the beauty of the fair tax is that it ends all the loopholes because it abolishes the IRS, which is like, that's my ultimate ideal dream, is to like get rid of the IRS. I hate the IRS, right?
And the Federal Reserve.
Make it go away, right? Make that stuff go away, right?
That's right.
So I literally started talking about the fair tax, and then I would get people that would come at me, and some guy would say, "Oh, that's way too radical. You're never going to get that passed. You need to come up with a solution that's less crazy than that, because that's insane. Nobody's going to, and so then I was like, okay, well, like I said earlier, first things first, what would I do incrementally if I couldn't get that? Well, I'd love to see a payroll tax cut at the minimum so that every working person in America could take home more of the money that they make, right? Why are we stealing money out of their check? If everybody had more money, life would be a lot better and they wouldn't have to rely on the government so much, right?
That's right.
But we take their money away from them, and then they have to rely on the government because we took all their money, right? So that would be a thing. And I mean, of course, my ideal is to end as taxation as much as possible. I'd love to get taxes down to zero, but in order to do that, we have to cut spending and cut the government, right? So that we don't have this need for money to pay for all these services that we're getting, right? So it's kind of like a 3-part series, right? Like the minimal thing I'd like to do as a payroll tax cut, I'd love to implement the fair tax and abolish the IRS and make everything transparent and make it a more voluntary system instead of a forced tax system. With the fair tax, no one's going to jail for filing their paperwork inappropriately, and nobody ever has to file paperwork again, right? And then my ideal system is, no IRS, and like the least amount of sales tax that we could possibly get by with, to fund the basic functions of the government. So that's kind of that. And yeah, I hate taxes. I loathe taxes. I want to abolish as many taxes as I possibly can.
That's what we like to hear. I have a small business, so I'm no lover of the tax man or the IRS, because they always just like to take me for everything. So it's kind of
and just complying, right? Just complying. Like how much nicer would it be if you never had to think about it again, right? It's that it takes up your time and energy. And not only does it take your money, but it takes your time and energy and your productivity, because the time that you're spending complying, you could be working and making some more money to put some, better food in your family's mouth, or pay the rent, or, turn up the heater a little bit more in the wintertime, right? Or eat some more top ramen.
Oh, no more top ramen, please.
No more top ramen.
I've had my fair share of that stuff, my bachelor years. Oh my God. I probably eaten thousands of packets of ramen. Thousands. It's
absolutely.
So
yes.
And it's got a bunch of cancer agents and shit in there. I mean,
absolutely.
every bachelor in the world's probably gonna, probably end up with the C word, just from eating that shit. I hope not. No, really. Now, what would be your solution to keeping jobs here in America rather than having them outsourced? Because that seems to be huge. And we saw during the pandemic how bad, things turned out when we didn't have stuff because it was made in other places. What would be your way to keep business here in America and keep things, keep jobs in America and just keep the American economy floating,
Well, a big part of that actually is the answer to the last question, which is taxation, right? If you tax companies and you tax people, you make it harder for them to compete. If there's a country that has no taxes on their people or their corporations, right? Those companies and those people have an immediate advantage over the other people. So is a good business example. So in the business that I was in, it was a worldwide business, and there was people that I was competing with, overseas, right? Mm-hmm. And those people in those overseas jurisdictions paid no tax. Okay, in some of those places they had no tax liability whatsoever, right? And in the business that I was in, you were buying traffic from the internet. You were getting eyeballs through marketing, right? And so you were spending money, and so you had a certain margin that you could like play with as far as what your profit was and where you can go. Well, if you're paying 35% tax and another guy's not paying 35% tax, he has an immediate 35% advantage over you, and he can cut his expenses down to right below where your tax rate is. So he can go to like 34% or whatever. He's still making money, and now he's put you out of business because you can no longer compete because you can't afford to pay tax and stay in business, essentially, is what it comes down to, right? So the reason jobs have been fleeing since the 70s, really, in America, since we started like losing all our manufacturing and stuff, is government overregulation, is really what it comes down to. Overtaxation, overregulation. It's like, I think that there was good things that came out of like unions, as far as like, not having people work, horrible conditions, and like allowing people to have some dignity in their workspace. I think that's good stuff, but they took it way too far, and it's now to the point where it's overly expensive to do business in America. The reason jobs flee overseas is because it's just too expensive here, right? The labor rate is too expensive. And why is the labor rate too expensive? Well, mostly because of regulations, right? It's like every time you add a regulation that a company has to comply with, it increases the cost of each employee for that company. And so essentially the government has priced the jobs out of America. So if we want to get jobs back into America, we need to remove government regulation and government taxation. I think the fair tax would be a huge step in that direction, because it basically creates a system where it's not punishing you for being successful, right? It only takes money from you when you want to consume stuff. Right. And so it totally changes because right now the system punishes you. The more successful you are, the more punishment you get from the government. Right. Do we really want a system that punishes success? No, we don't. We don't want to, we want a system that makes success what everybody wants to do. Right. So in order to bring jobs back in America, the answer to me is simple as cut government regulation and cut taxation. And you can bring that stuff. If our tax system was a system that didn't tax corporations at all, how many corporations do you think would move into the United States? Because our legal system is amazing. Our people are amazing. Our people are hardworking. Our people are very innovative and come up with some of the best solutions, on the planet. But the government's standing in their way of success. Is essentially what it comes down to.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down, really. I mean, it sounds good. Now, final question, and it's not about policy, and it's more of a personal question from me, and I'm probably sure many of us feel the same way. The past few years have been hard, man, with the whole COVID thing and the mandates and the vaccine. And I got to try to keep my emotions in check here because I feel some type of way about it. But Lars, like, they force people to do things that they didn't necessarily want to do. And that was take that shot. They try to say, oh, we didn't force you to do anything. It was your job. Well, who told your job to do that? Who made the mandate that, companies with over 100 employees are going to have the shot or whatever? Who did that? Government did that. They told us that the shot was safe and effective. They told us that, you wouldn't get COVID or spread COVID if you got the shot. They told us that. They said it. I can pull up videos that they said these things. They demonized people who question it. People lost their jobs for not wanting to take it. Would you be willing to hold these people who did this to us accountable?
Yes, but I'm not sure that the president would have much ability to do that. But I mean, if I had that ability and it came up, then yes, I would be willing to hold people accountable. It's really interesting that it's and also very unfortunate that we got this pandemic, whether it was made in the lab or whether it was natural causes, I don't know, but it is up for debate. But we got this pandemic that was killing a lot of people. I mean, we know that it killed people, right? That's the thing. And somehow, somewhere in there, it got politicized, right? And it's a damn shame that it got politicized, because if people would have just like looked at it and from an informed opinion, right, we could have all made our own choices about it. But it became this like political, and I think a lot of it had to do with Trump and with the Democrats and the Republicans. They basically politicized it.
Oh yeah,
right.
Sure.
Like
100%.
like when you watched Cuomo, right? New York Governor Cuomo, right? He was having press releases every day. He was having a conference call, and the TV was blasting it nonstop, right? And so that made it very political, because he was politicizing it. And then Trump was like, "Oh shit, this guy's getting all the TV attention. I need to get on TV right now, and I need to politicize it in my way so that I don't lose political power," right? So you have these two guys basically like dueling on TV to one up each other on politicizing stuff instead of actually taking care of the problem, right? They weren't actually involved. They didn't want the solution, right? They didn't want to offer solutions. They just wanted to politicize it, right? So, the whole thing was extremely frustrating to me. It was extremely frustrating to me that people were willing, again, to use government to coerce one group of people onto another group of people, their ideals and their thoughts, and tell people how to live their lives. And it always, from day one, I was like, look, no matter what your belief in how this went down or where it comes from or any of that kind of stuff, it's up to you to make your own informed choice about what you want to do with your body. Exactly. Right. And it's the same with drugs, and it's the same with what you do in your bedroom. Whatever you want to do with your body is your damn choice. The government, again, doesn't need to be my nanny, right? I can make an informed decision about my medical needs, whatever those may be, right? And so I don't need the government in there telling me, oh, you have to do this. Now, I may follow those things because my informed decision might say, you know what, that makes the best sense to me, but that's my choice. And I'm not going to tell you, like, you need to live your life this certain way, right? Like exactly. That's totally unacceptable. And so as president, I will never be telling people you need to live this way. If I was president during the pandemic, I would have come at it from a more informative situation, right? These are the things that we have. These are the things that we know about this. These are the recommendations that we think are the best way to protect yourself. Okay. Now go make your decision. And we're not going to tell you how you have to do it. We're not going to tell your employer how they have to do it. We're not going to tell the business how they have to do it. Everybody's going to make up their own mind and what works for them. And we're all going to respect each other's decisions, right? Because everybody's decision counts.
Right. I mean, that's kind of how I took it. But now, like, you look at it now, and, you know, all you got to do is really connect the dots. I'm not going to say it either which way. I'll probably get in big trouble if I do say it. But, like, people are dying. People are having heart attacks. People are having cardiac arrest. There's certain numbers that have gone up since January of 2021 where something had just dropped and, you know, whatever. I personally feel like the government needs to be held accountable for what has happened. Because they did.
So the Congress would be the one that would hold themselves accountable, and I don't see them holding them. And I don't see them holding themselves accountable.
Hence
right?
My laughter.
Like they might roll out some person to take the fall for this, right? They might be like this is the fall guy, but the Congress overall is not going to take responsibility for like screwing the American people. That's just not going to happen. And also remember. Every not only was every state different with every governor was sort of autonomous, but when it comes right down to it, if you read about the laws of health services, most counties' health commissioner is the end all and be all of what you're going to be doing. Like when it comes down to it, they get to decide whether you're locked down or not. And in fact, I live in California, and in California, the health commissioner of the county has the ultimate authority of what's going to happen, not the governor, right? The county health person is the person that decides what you're going to be doing or not, right? And so it's really interesting. I looked into that early on because I was like, how can these people tell me to not leave my house? Who has that authority, right? It's like, the thing that really irritated me the most was there was like old people were driving their cars down to watch the sunset during COVID, and the cops were rolling them up and saying, you can't be out here. And I'm like, they're in their car with their window rolled up. What are you talking about right now? And they're like, no, you got to go home. It's unsafe for you to be out. And so like the impression, it was like the government saw this little crack where they could just get ultimate authority, and you just watch them totally abuse it. And it just gives me a lot of fear for the future whenever we have another crisis where they can, insert their authority to like take command of your life, right? And it's like we've already seen that because that crack opened up, we've already seen many examples now where the government is like, oh, I've got this authority now. Now I know, I've been able to lock people down. So now we're going to tell them that they have to behave this way or they have to do this, right? Because now it's the Overton window shifted, and now it's the norm to be able to tell people how to behave and act, right? And it's just like we sort of opened up Pandora's box, and I hope that we can put it back in, but it could be challenging.
I tell people all the time, it wasn't the government. It's not what the government did necessarily what freaked me out during COVID. It was the compliance by the citizens what freaked me out. The government's going to do what they're going to do no matter what. That wasn't surprising what they did. Not on my end anyways. What did surprise me was so many were to follow orders that were obviously tyrannical and unconstitutional. I live in Michigan. Our COVID protocols were insane here. Gretchen, big Gretch. Oh my God.
Yeah. We had that in California too. The interesting thing about that though is that there's a lot of societal pressure too. So I went out to eat with my kid, and we went into a Mexican food place, and it was during the pandemic, and they had a mask mandate in California. You couldn't like go anywhere without a mask, and so I wore the mask inside the restaurant and ordered my food. And then I came outside and I took the mask off, and I was walking on the sidewalk. There was very few people out. It was kind of a rainy day, and I was walking maybe 30 feet to my car. Like I wasn't going very far. Right. And and this woman come at me, and she just started berating me for putting other people's lives in danger, that I was so selfish for not wearing the mask outside, and I was just like, what are you talking about right now, lady? Like, if you are concerned about me and not having a mask on, then walk the other way, right? Or like, don't come close to me. You know what I mean? It was just, so there's this, the compliance in a sort of way was a lot like high school, right? Like nobody wants to be the person that stands out, because if you're the person that stands out, you're going to get picked on. You're going to get the finger pointed at you. You're going to get laughed at, right? So a lot of people in high school, they just wear the same clothes, keep their head down, don't act out, right? And so I feel like that societal pressure is what came out in COVID and really like caused people to just comply, because they just didn't want to like deal with all the crap they would have to deal with in order to just not wear a mask for 20 feet down the street or whatever. And so it was really challenging time. I hope we don't ever have to go through that again in my lifetime. It was the effects of COVID have changed society completely. Like things are never going back to the way they were before.
The normal
COVID.
that we once knew will never be.
It's never coming back.
9/11. Before the normal we knew before 9/11 was no more.
Yes.
And then we made our new normal after that. And then
what happened during those two things?
They stripped
massive government control, massive government intervention in your life. So it's like, we're not going back, because government has like passed a certain point that it's never going back to where it was before. Right. And so we just brought this up, but that's really disappointing, even just thinking about it. Right. Is like, yes, it was so nice to be able to go to an airport and just roll on in with your family, and they could hug you goodbye as you got on the airplane, and everything was easy, and it didn't take a million years to get through, and you didn't feel like a criminal every time you showed up at the airport. But here we are, right? And it's like if we didn't have all the restrictions that we have, if we didn't have the Patriot Act, how many other terrorist attacks would have occurred? I'm going to venture to guess probably none. I feel like we I feel like we didn't stop anything, but all we did was create this monstrous government that, you know, is nanny state that tells us how to live our life. I don't feel any safer. I don't feel any safer, but I do feel like I'm more oppressed than ever before. Right.
I mean,
And it's like, it seems like that government just keeps doing that over and over and over again. It's super frustrating and disappointing. And I hope as president, I don't ever, you know, trample on people's rights, and I give people more freedom than less freedom.
I dig that. Is it now, before I let you go, because it's getting to be, you know, an hour-ish, and I know you're a busy guy. I don't want to take too much of your time. Is there anything you want to say to people, like, you know, before we go?
No, just you know, I'm gonna be looking for delegates in at the convention in 2024. So if you are a person that is interested in my messaging and could be a delegate for me and vote for me at the convention, that'd be awesome. You can learn more about me on Facebook is where I'm mostly at Lars for President, but I also have Twitter, and you can go to my website, lars24.com, to kind of give me some donations. Or I'm looking for donations, not necessarily for money, but just to show that I'm supported by people. I'd like to get a few thousand people donating to me, even like $5, just to show that, like, hey, we like this guy's message. We want to hear more of it. We want to see him on the debates with the rest of the libertarian candidates, and let him, you know, share his pitch with people, kind of a thing. So, you know, I have a few goals in running for president. One of the things that I'm been working on really hard is public speaking. It wasn't something that I ever did or had any ability to do. So this is something that I've been, like, for the last 6 months or so, I've been really working on my public speaking abilities. And I have a goal of getting on the stage at the 24 convention, and, you know, and pitching the people my ideas, and hopefully they resonate with people, and we can move forward. And one last thing is that I have an idea for running in the 2024 presidential campaign, is that I think we have an opportunity to win an electoral vote, so that on election night, they'll be like, Ohio is blue, Florida is red, and
Yeah.
Texas is red, California is blue. Oh, what is this state right here? Why is it yellow? Why is it gold? Right? Why is this state gold? And they would freak out. The mainstream media would absolutely lose their stuff if there was gold on the map on election night in 2024. And I have an idea on how to make that happen. I think it's achievable, right? And so, if the Libertarian Party could be the deciding factor in the presidential race, one way or another, right? I don't really care whether Democrats win or Republicans win, because, as we discussed earlier, I think they're the same, the party of the corporations.
Yep,
It
that's
doesn't
right.
really matter to me, right? And so people are like, oh, you can't vote for that because the evil Democrats will get in. You can't vote for that because the evil Republicans can't get in. And I'm like, they're the same. It doesn't matter. What I
Yep.
want to do is, like, I want to be the deciding vote in America on election night, and they'll be like, that guy Lars screwed everything up for insert whatever party it is here, right? because the thing is the mainstream media would not shut up about that for like a month. All they'd be talking about is libertarians and how they screwed everything up, right? Or how they, or, you know, and so that would be huge media attention. And what I'd really like to see, one of the goals for 2024 that I'd like to see come out of the whole election cycle, is that if every registered libertarian person made a commitment today that they would get one more registered libertarian by the time the election happens, they would convince one friend to register as a libertarian, we could double the amount of libertarians that we have in America today overnight. And it's really, like, that's not a big commitment. Can we all commit together to find one friend and get them to join the Libertarian Party and to you know, sign up and register as a libertarian? I think that'd be an awesome goal for us to meet in 2024.
I think with them wanting to run it back with Biden and Trump, for fuck's sake. But seriously, that's what they want to do. They want to run it
Yep.
back again in 24
Yep.
with Trump and Biden. And I think this would be the libertarians' time to shine. And I think this would be their best opportunity to possibly surprise some folks, because at the end of the day, I don't think most people want this shit.
No,
Especially
they don't.
with those two.
No. No, we can, one of the things I've been saying on my campaign is that we can do better. Is this the best America has to offer? These two clowns is the very best. I can think of 1,000 people that would be better presidents than those two guys any day of the week, right? And
Yeah,
but
right.
that's what they're rolling out for us to. That's our choice again. Two piles of crap, right? We can do better. We must do better,
We
right?
deserve better.
We we deserve better. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Lars, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, check him out. Lars for President. Get on his socials. Lars Mapstead. He's running in 24. Let's show him some love. And thanks for doing this. And much love, y'all. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you so much.